Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and watched the holographic display show another dead world. The blue planet that once held 3 million human colonists now appeared as a gray ball of rock. No cities, no farms, no life at all. The Kythera swarm had eaten everything and moved on to find their next meal. Commander Lisa Bradley walked up to him with a datapad in her hand. Her face looked tired and her uniform was wrinkled from working too many hours without sleep.
She had been his second in command for 8 years, and he had never seen her look this defeated. The news on the pad was worse than he expected.
The Galactic Council had voted 847 to 12 to declare humanity strategically irrelevant. Earth and all human colonies were being removed from the protected species list. No more council fleets would respond to distress calls from human worlds. No more aid shipments or medical supplies. They were on their own against the swarm. Jake read the official statement twice. The council claimed that human military forces had proven ineffective against the Kythera threat. After the disaster at Kepler Prime, where humanity lost 47 ships and saved only empty space, other species had lost faith in human abilities. The Altarians had even suggested that human colonists should evacuate to safer core world planets and abandon their frontier settlements entirely. Captain Ryan Torres entered, the bridge carrying his helmet under his arm. His armor still showed burn marks from the last battle, and there was dried blood on his gloves. Ryan had commanded the ground defense of New Austin Colony when the swarm hit 3 weeks ago. He was one of only 12 survivors out of 5,000 defenders. Ryan walked straight to the tactical display and pointed at the red markers showing swarm positions. His voice was rough from breathing smoke and dust during the evacuation. The Kythera were not attacking randomly like everyone thought. They were hunting human settlements with purpose and planning. While other species received early warning broadcasts that let them escape, human colonies got no warning at all. The swarm ships would appear in human systems and immediately target population centers. They ignored military installations until after they had consumed every civilian. Ryan had watched from orbit as the biomechanical ships landed like giant insects and began dissolving entire cities into organic soup. The creatures seemed to know exactly where humans lived and worked. Dr. Elena Vasquez joined the group around the display. She was the lead xenobiologist for the human fleet and had spent years studying alien life forms. Her latest report made everyone uncomfortable. After examining wreckage from the research station on Harmony 7, she had found something that changed everything they thought they knew about the swarm. Elena activated a small hologram that showed crystalline structures about the size of dinner plates. The crystals had grown inside the destroyed laboratory and were definitely Kythera in origin. But these were not weapons or communication devices. They were some kind of biological analysis equipment. The crystals had been studying human DNA samples that were stored in the lab. The swarm was not just eating human colonies for food or territory. They were learning about human biology in ways that no one understood. Elena had found similar crystals at 4 other attack sites. Each time the Kythera consumed a human settlement, they left behind these study devices. They were collecting information about human genetics and storing it somewhere. Jake stared at the hologram and felt cold despite the warm bridge air. An enemy that studied its prey was much more dangerous than one that simply attacked for food. The Kythera had intelligence and curiosity. They wanted to understand humans for reasons that could not be good. The communication officer called out from his station. A priority message was coming in from Earth Defense Command. The transmission was heavily encrypted and marked for Admiral Morrison only. Jake walked to his private office behind the bridge and activated the secure channel. Admiral Patricia Stone appeared on the screen. She was the highest-ranking officer in the human fleet and reported directly to Earth government. Her expression was more serious than Jake had ever seen. She spoke carefully as if someone might be listening to their conversation. Earth's deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual activity in the Sol system. Long-range sensors were picking up massive energy signatures from the asteroid belt. The readings were coming from sectors that had been empty for over 200 years. Survey ships had mapped those areas completely during the early expansion period and found nothing but rocks and ice. Patricia leaned closer to the camera. The energy signatures were not natural phenomena. They showed patterns that suggested artificial construction and advanced technology. Whatever was out there had been hidden or dormant for a very long time. It was waking up now, and the timing could not be accidental. She transmitted a set of coordinates and told Jake to investigate immediately. He was to take his fastest ship and a small crew, no other vessels and no communication with Fleet Command until he returned. The mission was classified at the highest level. Not even the Galactic Council could know about this discovery. The transmission ended with Patricia saying something that made no sense to Jake. She looked directly into the camera and spoke just 4 words that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The Titans remember everything. Jake sat in his office for several minutes after the screen went dark. Titans were creatures from old Earth mythology, giant beings with incredible power who fought wars against the gods themselves. He had no idea what Patricia meant by using that word or why she looked so frightened when she said it. The asteroid belt coordinates were in a region called the Graveyard. Early colonists had given it that name because several exploration ships had disappeared there during the first century of space travel. Eventually, the area was marked as a navigation hazard and avoided by all traffic. No one had been there in over 50 years. Jake returned to the bridge and found his officers still studying the swarm positions. The red markers had grown larger while he was away. 3 more human colonies had gone silent in the past hour. The Kithera were accelerating their attack pattern and moving deeper into human space. He looked at his crew and realized they had no idea how much their situation was about to change. The discovery in the asteroid belt might be humanity's salvation, or it could be something much worse. Ancient technology was never predictable and usually dangerous. Jake ordered the Valiant to change course for the Sol system. He told his officers they were investigating a possible weapons cache that might help against the swarm. It was not exactly a lie, but it was not the complete truth either. The complete truth was something that apparently only Admiral Stone understood. As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Jake wondered what kind of Titans could be hiding in the darkness between worlds. He would find out soon enough. Colonel Danny Wright stepped out of the shuttle and looked at the massive structure floating in space before him. The thing was easily 10 times larger than the biggest human battleship he had ever seen. Dark metal surfaces covered with strange symbols stretched away in all directions. This was definitely not a natural asteroid. Engineer Sophie Martinez floated beside him in her spacesuit and ran her scanner over the hull plating. The readings made no sense at all. The metal was human in composition, but created using techniques that did not exist in any database. Carbon dating showed the structure was over 200 years old, but the power systems inside were still active. Dr. Nathan Cross pushed himself along the hull, using small jets in his suit. As the expedition's historian, he was trying to match the architectural style to known human construction projects. The curved sections and weapon mounting points looked familiar, but he could not place them exactly. Then he found a section where the hull plating had been damaged by micrometers. Underneath the dark outer layer was bright titanium steel, with markings that made Nathan's heart race. The serial numbers and construction codes belonged to the Colonial Defense Initiative. That program had been classified so heavily that most records were destroyed after the peace treaties with the major galactic powers. Only a few historians even knew it had existed. The CDI had been humanity's response to early tensions with alien species during first contact. When humans began expanding into space, they discovered that most other races had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The technology gap was enormous, and many species viewed humans as primitive newcomers who should stay in their own small corner of the galaxy. Sophie found an airlock that responded to her touch. The massive doors opened with a soft hiss that meant the structure still held atmosphere after 2 centuries. Emergency lighting activated automatically and revealed corridors large enough to drive trucks through. Everything was built on a scale that suggested this was not just a ship, but an entire mobile city. Danny led the team deeper into the structure while keeping his weapon ready. The corridors were empty but clean. Dust should have covered every surface after so many years, but the air recycling systems were still working. Whoever had built this place had intended it to remain functional for a very long time. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster caught up with the group at what appeared to be a main control center. Banks of monitors and computer terminals filled a room the size of a football field. Amy was their technical specialist and immediately began trying to activate the dormant systems. Most of the equipment was offline, but she could detect massive power sources somewhere deeper in the structure. The moment Amy's fingers touched the main control panel, everything changed. Lights came on throughout the entire facility and a deep humming sound filled the air. Through the viewports, they could see other structures in the asteroid field beginning to activate. Dozens of massive shapes that had been hidden among the rocks were revealing themselves as more artificial constructs. A voice spoke from speakers throughout the control room. The words were in perfect English, but the accent was strange and old-fashioned. The computer intelligence identified itself as Atlas and welcomed them to Battle Station Excalibur. It had been waiting for authorized personnel to arrive and reactivate the Titan Defense Network. Amy asked Atlas to explain what the Titan Defense Network was supposed to defend against. The AI's response was delivered in a calm tone that somehow made the words even more frightening. The network had been created to protect humanity from existential threats that conventional military forces could not handle. Threats like the Kythera swarm. Atlas had been monitoring galactic communications for over 200 years. It knew about every battle, every defeat, and every world that had fallen to the swarm. The AI had calculated probability models for thousands of different scenarios and reached the same conclusion every time. Humanity would face the Kythera alone, and conventional weapons would not be enough to win. Captain Steve Phillips walked into the control room while the team was still talking to Atlas. His uniform was from a design that had not been used in over a century, and his hair was white from centuries in cryogenic sleep. Steve had been the commanding officer of the Titan fleet when it was first placed in standby mode during the early days of galactic peace. Steve looked around the control room and smiled at the shocked expressions on everyone's faces. He had been expecting this day to arrive eventually. The galactic community had always been more fragile than most species wanted to admit. When a real threat appeared, the pretty alliances and cooperation agreements would collapse quickly. The captain explained that the Titan fleet had been humanity's insurance policy. During the first decades of interstellar expansion, human leaders had realized that their species was extremely vulnerable. Earth had only one planet while other races controlled hundreds of worlds. If humanity ever faced extinction, they would need weapons that could even the odds dramatically. 57 battle stations had been constructed in secret, using technology that was decades ahead of anything in the official human fleet. Each station was a mobile fortress capable of independent operation for years at a time. They carried weapons and defenses that were specifically designed to fight enemies like the Kythera swarm. Steve walked to a different control panel and began entering authorization codes. The viewport showed more structures powering up throughout the asteroid field. Ship designs that looked like massive predatory insects were emerging from camouflaged hiding places. These were the actual Titan warships that would carry the battle to the enemy. Atlas provided a status report that was both encouraging and terrifying. All 57 Titans were operational and ready for deployment. Their crews had been maintained in cryogenic suspension and could be awakened within hours. The AI had used the past 2 centuries to continuously upgrade weapons and defensive systems using technology reverse-engineered from captured alien devices. Danny asked the obvious question that everyone was thinking. Why had humanity built such powerful weapons and then hidden them away? Steve's answer revealed the true cost of keeping galactic peace. If other species had known about the Titans, they would have demanded their destruction or tried to take the technology for themselves. War would have started immediately. Humanity had chosen to appear weak and helpless while secretly maintaining the ability to defend itself. The Titans represented the ultimate expression of human military engineering, but they could only be revealed when humanity faced complete extinction. That moment had finally arrived. Amy looked at the tactical displays showing Kythera fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The swarm was larger and more organized than anyone had realized. They controlled over 300 star systems and were advancing toward the core worlds where most galactic civilization was concentrated. Conventional forces had failed to stop them everywhere. Steve smiled grimly as he watched the last Titan emerge from its hiding place among the asteroids. The galaxy thought humanity was defeated and irrelevant. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. The Titans were ready to show the universe what human determination could accomplish. When pushed to the absolute limit, Atlas began plotting attack routes to Kythera positions, while the Titan crews started their awakening procedures. The silent battle was about to begin. Captain Steve Phillips stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched 56 other Titans move through dark space toward their targets. The ships traveled in complete silence using routes that Atlas had calculated over decades of careful observation. No other intelligence in the galaxy knew these paths existed. The Titans moved like ghosts between star systems. Their hulls absorbed all electromagnetic radiation, and their engines produced no detectable energy signature. Each ship was a masterpiece of stealth technology that made them invisible to every known form of sensor. The Kythera would never see them coming. Major Ashley Grant commanded the Titan Thunderbolt and led the first strike group toward the Vega system. Her ship specialized in rapid attack operations and carried weapons designed to disable enemy vessels without destroying them completely. The plan required capturing Kythera bioships intact so that human scientists could study their technology. Ashley had trained for this mission her entire adult life. She had spent 20 years in cryogenic simulation running practice battles against computer-generated Kythera fleets. Every possible combat scenario had been programmed into the training systems. Her crew knew exactly how to fight an enemy they had never actually encountered. The Vega system contained the largest Kythera staging area in human space. Over 200 bioships were gathered around the dead planets feeding on the remains of 3 human colonies. Intelligence reports showed that the swarm was using Vega as a launching point for attacks deeper into human territory. Sergeant Pete Harrison checked his equipment one final time as the Thunderbolt approached the target zone. He commanded the Titan Marine forces that would board and secure enemy vessels during the attack. His soldiers wore armor that had been specifically designed to fight inside living alien ships. The suits could seal against biological toxins and deliver electric shocks that disrupted organic neural networks. Pete's Marines had trained in simulation, chambers that perfectly recreated the interior of Kythera vessels. They knew how to move through corridors that were actually blood vessels, and how to disable control centers that were really giant brains. Fighting inside a living enemy ship required tactics that no other military force had ever developed. Dr. Kate Thompson worked in the weapons laboratory deep inside the Thunderbolt's hull. She was making final adjustments to ammunition that would be used for the first time in actual combat. The bullets and energy charges had been designed to adapt during battle by analyzing enemy defenses and modifying their effects accordingly. Kate's adaptive weapons could change from armor, piercing to explosive to electromagnetic pulse depending on what kind of target they encountered. The ammunition contained microscopic computers that communicated with each other during flight. If one bullet discovered an effective attack method, it would instantly share that information with every other round fired by human forces. LIS provided constant updates on Kythera fleet positions as the Titans closed in on Vega. The enemy ships were arranged in a feeding formation around the largest dead planet. Biomechanical tendrils extended down to the surface where they were dissolving the remains of human cities and pumping the organic matter back up to the main vessels. The sight made Ashley angry in a way that surprised her. She had seen recordings of Kythera attacks many times during training, but watching it happen in real time was different. These creatures were not just killing humans for food or territory. They were erasing every trace that human civilization had ever existed in this system. Steve opened a communication channel to all Titan commanders as they reached their final positions. The attack would begin in 30 seconds with no warning given to the enemy. Every human ship would strike simultaneously to achieve maximum surprise. The goal was to completely destroy the Kythera force before they could send any distress signals. To other swarm units, the first weapons fired were gravitational disruptors that created localized space distortions around enemy ships. The Kythera vessels suddenly found themselves trapped in gravity wells that prevented them from moving or communicating with each other. Then the real attack began. Ashley's ship emerged from stealth mode directly above the largest bioship and opened fire with particle cannons that had been charging for hours. The energy beams cut through organic armor like it was soft tissue. Explosions rippled along the enemy hull as internal systems overloaded and caught fire. Pete's Marines launched in assault pods that punched through weakened sections of Kythera hull. The pods were designed to seal the holes they created so that the interior atmosphere would not escape. Pete's soldiers needed the enemy ships to remain alive long enough for them to capture the control centers. Kate's adaptive weapons proved their worth immediately. The first rounds fired at Kythera bioarmor discovered that electrical attacks were highly effective against the organic neural networks. Within seconds, every human weapon in the battle zone had switched to electrical discharge mode. Enemy ships began convulsing as their nervous systems were disrupted. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but it changed everything. When the shooting stopped, 197 Kythera vessels had been destroyed or captured. Not a single Titan had taken any damage. The enemy force that had been terrorizing human space for months was completely eliminated. Atlas immediately began analyzing the captured bioships, while Pete's Marines secured the vessels. The AI discovered that Kythera technology was far more advanced than anyone had realized, but it had critical weaknesses that human weapons could exploit. Every future battle would be easier because of what they learned at Vega. Steve looked at the tactical display showing the burning remains of the Kythera fleet. This was just the beginning of humanity's response to the swarm. 56 other Titans were moving toward targets throughout the galaxy. The enemy would soon learn that humans were not the helpless prey species they had assumed. The most important part of the victory was that no distress signals had escaped from Vega. The rest of the Kythera swarm had no idea that their forces were under attack by an enemy they had never encountered before. The Titans would be able to continue their silent campaign until they were ready to reveal themselves to the galaxy. Ashley received new orders from Atlas as her crew finished securing the battle zone. Intelligence analysis of the captured ships had revealed the location of 3 more major Kythera staging areas. The Thunderbolt would lead attacks on all of them within the next 48 hours. Pete's Marines were already preparing for the next assault as they transferred valuable prisoners and technology, samples to secure holding areas. The captured Kythera creatures were still alive, but their ship bodies were completely under human control. For the first time since the war began, humans had taken living members of the swarm prisoner. Steve smiled as he watched his Titans disappear back into dark space. The galaxy still had no idea that humanity possessed weapons capable of defeating the Kythera swarm. That ignorance would be humanity's greatest advantage in the battles that were coming. The silent war had begun and the Titans were winning. Commander Rick Bailey watched through the viewscreen as another Kythera supply convoy exploded in the darkness between stars. His Titan Devastator had been hunting enemy logistics ships for 3 weeks and had destroyed 47 convoys without being detected even once. The Kythera were starting to starve as their food shipments disappeared into empty space. The Devastator specialized in long-range bombardment using weapons that most species would consider impossible to build. Rick's ship could fire projectiles that would travel for months through space and then activate when they reached their targets. Entire Kythera-controlled star systems were now sitting on top of delayed activation, bombs that would trigger when Atlas decided the time was right. Rick had been awakened from cryogenic sleep only 6 weeks ago, but he already felt like he had been fighting this war for years. The constant hit-and-run attacks were wearing down the Kythera swarm faster than anyone had expected. Enemy forces were pulling back from their forward positions to protect supply lines that were under constant assault. News of the mysterious attacks was spreading through galactic communication networks, but no intelligence agency could identify the attackers. The Kythera had never faced an enemy that could strike without warning and disappear before reinforcements arrived. Their standard tactics were failing against an opponent they could not see or predict. Admiral Jake Morrison received another encrypted message from Captain Steve Phillips while his official fleet was retreating from the latest Kythera advance. The message contained battle reports that seemed too good to be true. Human forces were winning every engagement while suffering 0 casualties. The tide of war was turning, but the galaxy did not know it yet. Jake read the tactical summaries with growing amazement. Titan forces had eliminated over 3,000 Kythera vessels in the past month. Enemy-controlled systems were exploding from within as delayed action weapons triggered chain reactions in biomechanical infrastructure. The swarm's expansion had stopped completely, and they were beginning to retreat toward their core territories. Steve's message also contained a warning that made Jake uncomfortable. The Titan fleet was ready to reveal itself to the galaxy, but the consequences would be permanent. Once other species learned about humanity's true military capabilities, the entire balance of galactic power would shift. Humanity would never again be able to pretend they were weak or harmless. Dr. Helen Parker was studying Kythera behavioral patterns from her laboratory aboard the Valiant when she made a discovery that changed everything. The swarm's aggressive targeting of human settlements was not random. or based on strategic value. The Kythera had encountered human technology before during a previous cycle of galactic civilization. Helen's analysis of captured bioship data revealed memory engrams that were millions of years old. The Kythera collective consciousness retained genetic memories of battles fought when the galaxy was young. They remembered fighting against weapons and tactics that were identical to modern human designs. The Titans were not just advanced ships but the evolutionary descendants of technology that had defeated the swarm eons. The revelation meant that humanity was not a new species that had recently developed space travel. They were the inheritors of an ancient civilization that had once ruled the galaxy before choosing to start over. The peaceful human expansion into space was actually a return to territories that their ancestors had once controlled. Helen sent her findings to Atlas and received a response that confirmed her worst fears. The AI had always known about humanity's ancient heritage, but had been programmed to keep that information secret until the right moment. The Titans were awakening not just to fight the Kythera, but to reclaim humanity's rightful place as the galaxy's dominant species. The final test came when the largest Kythera fleet ever assembled moved toward the core worlds where most galactic civilization was concentrated. Over 5,000 bioships advanced in perfect formation, while every species in the galaxy prepared for the end of their civilization. The Galactic Council's combined military forces prepared to make their last stand at Proxima Station. Admiral Morrison watched from the bridge of the Valiant as the Council fleets formed their defensive positions. Ships from dozens of different species had gathered to face the swarm, but everyone knew they would not be enough. The Kythera had never been defeated in a direct battle and their numbers seemed endless. The Council forces opened fire when the swarm reached weapons range, but their attacks barely slowed the enemy advance. Kythera bioships absorbed the damage and kept moving forward like living asteroids that could not be stopped. Within hours, the defensive line was breaking apart as enemy vessels pushed through gaps in the formation. Then space itself seemed to tear open as 57 Titans emerged from dark space in perfect battle formation. The massive ships appeared without warning directly behind the Kythera fleet, in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. Their hulls were black as midnight and covered with weapons that no other species had ever seen. Captain Steve Phillips broadcast a message on all frequencies that would be remembered for the rest of galactic history. His voice was calm and confident as he identified himself and his fleet. This is humanity responding to the galaxy's call for help. All non-Kythera vessels moved to minimum safe distance immediately. The Council fleets retreated in confusion, while the Titans opened fire with weapons that defied every known law of physics. Gravitational cannons created miniature black holes that consumed entire sections of the enemy formation. Reality disruptor beams erased Kythera ships from existence by unmaking the atomic bonds that held them together. Temporal weapons aged enemy vessels thousands of years in seconds until they crumbled into dust. Jake watched in stunned silence as the Titans systematically destroyed the largest military force in galactic history. The battle that was supposed to determine the fate of civilization lasted only 18 hours. When the shooting stopped, every single Kythera vessel had been eliminated, while the Titans had not even activated their defensive shields. The galaxy stared at the floating wreckage and tried to understand what they had just witnessed. Humanity had revealed weapons technology that was centuries beyond anything other species possessed. The peaceful species that everyone had dismissed as strategically irrelevant had just demonstrated the ability to reshape the balance of power throughout known space. Steve's final broadcast was even more shocking than his first. The Titans would return to their hidden positions and resume their silent watch over the galaxy. Humanity had always been the guardian species, but they had chosen to remain hidden until the moment of greatest need. The question now was whether other species wanted humanity to continue protecting them in secret or step forward as the acknowledged leaders of galactic civilization. Atlas began calculating the political and military implications of the revelation while the Titans prepared to disappear back into dark space. The silent battle was over, but the real war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. General Paul Sanders led his Titan ground forces through the twisting corridors of the Kythera central hive mind. The massive biomechanical structure had been growing in the dark space between galaxies for millions of years, and contained the collective consciousness that controlled every member of the swarm. Destroying it would end the war forever. Paul's soldiers moved carefully through passages that pulsed like arteries and breathed like lungs. The walls were covered with nerve clusters that transmitted information throughout the hive at the speed of light. Every step they took was monitored by an intelligence that was older than most star systems in the known galaxy. The Titan Marines wore armor that had been specifically designed for this final assault. Their suits could interface directly with alien biotechnology and override the neural commands that held the hive together. Each soldier carried weapons that fired synchronized pulses designed to sever the psychic links between different parts of the Kythera collective mind. Captain Monica Davis commanded the Titan Retribution from orbit, above the hive structure. Her ship was the most heavily armed vessel in the human fleet and had been waiting for this moment since the day it was first constructed. The Retribution's main weapon was a consciousness disruptor that could shatter the mental bonds holding the swarm together. The final battle had been raging for 3 days across dozens of star systems as the Titans hunted down every remaining Kythera force in the galaxy. Enemy fleets that had terrorized civilized space for decades were being systematically destroyed by weapons they could not understand or counter. The swarm's vast numerical advantage meant nothing against technology that could erase entire formations in seconds. Atlas coordinated the attacks from processing centers hidden throughout human space. The AI had spent centuries preparing for this moment and knew exactly where every Kythera vessel could be found. Titan forces struck simultaneously at targets that were light years apart while maintaining perfect tactical coordination. The galaxy watched in stunned amazement as the species they had abandoned to die demonstrated military capabilities that surpassed anything in recorded history. Human weapons operated on principles that most civilizations could not even theoretically understand. Matter conversion beams transformed enemy ships into harmless gas clouds. Quantum disruptors deleted sections of space and everything within them. Paul's team reached the central chamber of the hive mind and found themselves facing a biological computer the size of a small moon. Billions of neural pathways connected processing nodes that had been accumulating knowledge and memories since before the first galactic civilization arose. The consciousness housed within this structure controlled every Kythera in existence. The hive mind spoke to the humans using telepathic communication that bypassed their armor's defenses. Its voice was ancient and filled with the memories of countless conquered worlds. The consciousness revealed that it had been fighting humanity's ancestors for eons in a cycle of war and peace that repeated every few million years. The Kythera had originally been created as biological weapons by a species that had been destroyed by the first human galactic empire. The swarm had spent millions of years evolving and growing stronger while waiting for humanity to return. This war was not about territory or resources, but about settling a debt that was older than recorded history. Paul listened to the alien consciousness while his soldiers prepared their final assault. The hive mind offered humanity a bargain that it had never offered to any other species. Join the swarm voluntarily and become part of the collective consciousness. In return, the Kythera would spare all other galactic civilizations and focus their expansion into empty regions of space. The offer was rejected before Paul could even respond. Captain Davis fired the consciousness disruptor from orbit and sent waves of mental static cascading through every neural pathway in the hive structure. The ancient intelligence screamed in frequencies that shattered crystalline formations. Throughout the chamber, Paul's Marines activated their neural severing weapons and began cutting the psychic links that connected the hive mind to Kythera forces throughout the galaxy. Each broken connection caused violent convulsions in the biomechanical walls as sections of the collective consciousness died forever. The alien intelligence was being systematically dismantled by weapons designed specifically for this purpose. The effects were immediate and visible across known space. Kythera vessels throughout the galaxy suddenly stopped moving and began drifting helplessly through space. The collective consciousness that had coordinated their attacks for millions of years was fragmenting into isolated pieces that could not communicate with each other. Monica watched through her ship's sensors as the massive hive structure began collapsing in on itself. Without the central intelligence to maintain its biological systems, the ancient construct was dying like any other living creature. Millions of years of accumulated knowledge and memory were being erased as neural pathways shut down permanently. The final psychic scream of the Kythera collective mind was heard by every intelligent being in the galaxy, Then there was silence that seemed to stretch on forever. The swarm that had threatened to consume all civilization had been reduced to scattered groups of mindless bioships that posed no threat to anyone. Admiral Jake Morrison addressed the Galactic Council from the bridge of Captain Steve Phillips's flagship. The assembled representatives of dozens of species listened in shocked silence as he explained humanity's true role in galactic affairs. Humans had been the silent guardians of civilization for thousands of years while pretending to be weak and harmless. Jake revealed that every major threat to galactic stability had been quietly eliminated by human forces operating in secret. Pirates, rogue artificial intelligences, aggressive expansionist empires, and now the Kythera swarm had all been defeated by weapons and tactics that other species never knew existed. Humanity had been protecting the galaxy while letting others take credit for the peace and prosperity that resulted. The choice now facing every species was simple: accept humanity as the acknowledged leaders of galactic civilization, or continue the pretense that humans were just another member species. But the illusion of equality could never be maintained again after what the galaxy had witnessed during the war. Against the Kythera, Steve Phillips took control of the communication channel and delivered humanity's final message to the assembled species. The Titans would return to their hidden positions and resume their eternal watch over the galaxy. Human colonies would continue to appear weak and vulnerable, while secretly maintaining the most powerful military force in known space. The galaxy could choose to remember this lesson, or forget it as they preferred. But the next time civilization faced extinction, they would cry for help and humanity would answer. The Titans would rise again when they were needed, and the galaxy would be protected whether other species acknowledged their guardians or not. The transmission ended and the Titan fleet began disappearing back into dark space. Within hours, the massive warships had vanished completely, leaving only the wreckage of the Kythera force as proof that the battle had ever happened. Atlas resumed its patient monitoring of galactic communications while the Titans returned to their centuries-long sleep. The galaxy had cried for help, and humanity had answered with overwhelming force. The silent battle was over, but the eternal watch continued. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Titans waited for the next threat that would require their intervention. The galaxy was safe because humanity chose to make it so.